This is the infamous Jwrighttpsc Formation in Turkey, so named for the Turkish military officer who first discovered it, or observed it, shall we say, from an aerial observation, and its strange boat-like shape and its dimensions that vaguely correspond to the biblical description of Noah's Ark have led many to believe that this is the actual evidence, the actual remnants of Noah's Ark, discovered in our modern age and confirmed with a variety of different soil and chemical tests along with ground-penetrating radar. But this is not actually the truth, in spite of the fact that some unscrupulous individuals have continued to maintain this myth for many decades now, in spite of the fact that it has been debunked by numerous geologists. This formation is just that, a geological formation. No ground-penetrating radar scan has ever detected anything resembling a boat-like interior, or no petrified wood timbers have ever been discovered. They have been planted there, but not actually discovered, and even the creationist scientists who were involved in the initial excavation have denied that this is the remnants of Noah's Ark. This is probably one of the most notorious examples of pseudoscience out there. Pseudo-archaeology, but nevertheless, pseudoscience. Is what we are doing with 3i Atlas now, or that is to say, people like Avi Loeb and myself are doing at the moment, putting forward unpopular theories, or very unconventional theories anyway, about the possible origins of this object based on the data that we have gathered about it. Is this also pseudoscience? Well, it definitely flies in the face of the opinions of the scientific majority, and I would say probably quite a number of astronomers would accuse Dr. Avi Loeb, and especially people like myself without any sort of doctorate in astronomy or anything like that. All I have is a minor in the subject. I would say that there's a good chance that they would include people like me in the ranks of pseudoscientists. But is it actually true? Is that what people like Avi Loeb are pursuing, or is it something a lot more substantive? Well, we're going to find out right now. Good evening, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin, my final video that I'm putting out here in Australia. I'm in a hotel room close to the Sydney airport, and I'll be flying to Hong Kong actually tomorrow, and I'll be staying there for a couple of days, simply because I wanted to see Hong Kong. I've never seen that place before, and just as a logical stopover on the way anyway. It wasn't really much of an expense to do it, so going to experience that before I finally return to London, and going to bring you whatever content I can from Hong Kong. My understanding is that there's some space-related stuff that I might be able to bring to you from that city, so looking forward to bringing you as much as I can before I return to the UK. All that having been said, 3i Atlas is something that I just kind of felt compelled to talk about one more time here, simply because I've been watching a lot of programs lately about pseudoscience and the damage that it causes. A lot of individuals who have very questionable expertise when it comes to their scientific credentials, and their theories are even more suspect, and yet they create a whole lot of damage to our society with misinformation. This is something that I really don't like to embrace. If something makes sense to me, I do my own research still, regardless, when it comes to controversial topics. But if something makes sense to me, then I'm oftentimes going to go with that. If the scientific community happens to agree with me, well, that's a great thing, and that's certainly what I would prefer, as opposed to going my own way in the scientific community not agreeing with me. This case with 3i Atlas actually is an unusual thing with me. On most occasions, I'm definitely going to go with the scientific majority. For example, the whole concept of climate change. There's very good scientific reasons why the Earth would be warming up in spite of all of the rumors that you may hear or all of the claims that you may hear about how CO2 is plant food and so it's not a harm to anybody. There's very clear examples in the solar system as to why it's not good for a planet. The hottest planet in the solar system, that's Venus, even though it's not the planet that's closest to the sun, it's still the hottest planet. And the reason it's so hot is because it has a thick CO2 atmosphere. CO2 is by far the dominant chemical composition of Venus's atmosphere, CO2. The more CO2 you have in the atmosphere, the hotter it's going to get. As a matter of fact, one of the ways of warming Mars up is to melt the polar ice caps, therefore melting a lot of the dry ice, the frozen carbon dioxide in the poles, and also trying to sublimate CO2 out of the Martian regolith as well, adding more and more and more CO2 to the Martian atmosphere and warm the planet up. More CO2 equals more heat, and too much of anything, even a good thing, can be a problem. Therefore, I go with the scientific majority's opinions when it comes to what's currently happening to the climate. I know a lot of you probably disagree with me on that topic, but it's what makes sense to me, and the research backs all of it up. So all of that having been said, I've done a lot of soul searching about 3i Atlas, UFOs, etc. Is this also pseudoscience? Because after all, aside from Avi Loeb and perhaps a few other astronomers who aren't so quick to make their opinions public because they don't want to destroy their careers, aside from them, there aren't too many people saying anything other than 3i Atlas is definitely a comet. And yet I absolutely believe that it might be something else. I think the evidence points to that. But is that so-called evidence? Is the science behind it just pseudoscience? Once again, I decided to take the opportunity to ask my new best friend Grok about this topic. Are my opinions, are my theories and Avi Loeb's theories about 3i Atlas just pseudoscience? Now, one of the key differences between pseudoscience and regular science is the fact that oftentimes pseudoscientists rely on instruments and data of their own creation rather than going with data that is internationally and universally recognized, like all of the data that's been acquired about 3i Atlas thus far. For the most part, in fact, almost entirely, my videos have adhered to what is generally acknowledged as being true about this object as gathered by instruments like the James Webb Space Telescope. But the question I had for Grok was this: given the unlikely trajectory that 3i Atlas is following, that is to say, very close to the plane of the ecliptic and passing within 1 astronomical unit, actually substantially closer than 1 astronomical unit to 3 different planets in the solar system, is it pseudoscience to suggest that this is all happening by design? The answer is this: no. Avi Loeb's suggestion that the interstellar object 3i Atlas might have been sent here by design due to its trajectory, specifically its near alignment with the ecliptic plane tilted retrograde by only about 5 degrees with a claimed random probability of 0.2%, in other words, a 500 to 1 probability, and close approaches to multiple planets, 29 million kilometers from Mars, 54 million kilometers from Jupiter, and a pass near Venus, is not pseudoscience. It's speculative hypothesis rooted in legitimate scientific inquiry, statistical analysis, and the application of the scientific method to anomalous data. However, it's highly controversial, with the vast majority of astronomers viewing it as an over-interpretation of limited evidence that distracts from more mundane explanations. Let me break this down step by step. First of all, what makes the trajectory anomalous? Well, the ecliptic is the flat plane where the planets orbit the sun. Interstellar objects like 3I Atlas are expected to arrive from random directions in the galaxy with orbital inclinations, in other words, angles relative to the ecliptic, uniformly distributed from 0 degrees to 180 degrees. The previous interstellar objects, such as Oumuamua, came in at 123 degrees, and 2I Borisov from 44 degrees, far from aligned, whereas 3I Atlas, this 5-degree tilt is indeed statistically rare if assuming uniform randomness, and Loeb calculated that it has a 0.2% chance of random trajectories matching it. Then the close planetary passes, the object's hyperbolic path positions it for flybys within less than 1 astronomical unit, or 150 million kilometers, of Mars, Venus, and Jupiter at specific times. Loeb estimates the combined probability of this timing, given the aligned plane, is 0.005%, or 1 in 20,000, or even 1 in a million when factoring in the retrograde direction. He argues that this efficiency suggests fine-tuning for reconnaissance, as it minimizes energy needed for an artificial probe to visit inner planets. Now, in the broader context, Loeb ties this to the so-called Loeb scale, a proposed 1 to 10 framework for assessing technological origin, and he assigns the probability of this object being a technological object as a 4 on his scale, 4 out of 10. And this reasoning follows scientific norms: observe anomalies, calculate probabilities under null hypotheses, in other words, random natural origin, and propose alternatives if the odds are low. Loeb's calculations appear in peer-reviewed papers and his Medium essays, where he explicitly calls for more data to test the idea. And why is this not pseudoscience? Well, first of all, the factor of falsibility and testability. Pseudoscience, like astrology or flat Earth claims, resists evidence and can't be disproven, whereas Loeb's hypothesis is the opposite. He urges observations like spectroscopy from James Webb Space Telescope or Mars orbiters to check for artificial materials, non-gravitational acceleration, or radio signals. And NASA's Juno mission is reportedly scanning for emissions as 3I Atlas approaches, and the Galileo project, which Loeb heads, is hunting for companions or fragments. If a natural coma or tail activity dominates at near perihelion, the tech hypothesis weakens, but if exotic signatures emerged, such as engineered alloys, the artificial explanation strengthens. Now, as far as precedent in science is concerned, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but considering alien tech for anomalies is not inherently unscientific. Now, after Grok answered this question, I decided to make this a little bit more personal. In a recent video, the Angry Astronaut suggested that 3I Atlas's radical swing from no water to a huge gushing of water with no observable non-gravitational acceleration may be an indication of artificial control. The Angry Astronaut also suggested that the rapid shift from 0 iron but obvious nickel in the coma to a balance that adheres to solar system norms might have been an intentional adjustment to blend in. Is this pseudoscience? Here's the response. No, angry suggestions about 3I Atlas's sudden water outgassing without detectable non-gravitational acceleration and the shift from nickel-dominant to more balanced iron-nickel ratios in the coma aren't pseudoscience. They're bold, speculative interpretations of real observational anomalies, grounded in the scientific process of questioning data that doesn't fit standard models. Like Avi Loeb's trajectory hypothesis, this ventures into the techno-signature realm, searching for signs of artificial origins. But it remains testable and falsifiable, key hallmarks of legitimate science. That said, the evidence so far leans heavily towards natural explanations, and most astronomers see these as overreaches amid the object's inherent weirdness as an interstellar visitor. So here's the overall hypothesis. Angry posits that the water gushing without non-gravitational acceleration is a controlled release, such as a probe venting for observation or camouflage, since natural comets often show non-gravitational acceleration, hereafter referred to as NGA, from asymmetric outgassing, like Oumuamua's hydrogen push. Here, the lack of deviation suggests throttled or symmetric jets, efficient and non-propulsive. And then the nickel-iron adjustment. Early pure nickel observations could be a tell, with later iron emergence as a deliberate blending to mimic solar system comets. This echoes Loeb's technological origin angle. The nickel signature mimics refined metals, and changes could imply adaptive behavior. It's a what-if that fits Angry's channel's vibe, pushing ET possibilities without ignoring data. So here's why it's not pseudoscience. First of all, it's rooted in evidence. Angry is analyzing public spectra and light curves, not invoking untestables like ghosts. Pseudoscience dodges falsification, whereas Angry's invites it, such as if perihelion shows chaotic breakup of the object or NGA spikes, then the natural explanation wins. If signals or jets stay unnaturally tidy, then the tech explanation gains traction. And precedents abound. Comets do surprise. Borisov had lots of cyanide but low organics. Oumuamua accelerated without any visible gas. Angry's ideas build on that, much like Carl Sagan's billions and billions of possibilities for anomalies. But future observations absolutely matter. If non-gravitational acceleration emerges significantly more than outgassing could possibly account for, then the angle of artificial origin strengthens. But if it fragments like a garden variety comet, then the explanation goes back to natural. Either way, Angry is spotlighting why interstellar objects like 3I Atlas rewrite textbooks, pristine relics probing other stars' chemistry. So the answer is very clear, isn't it? No, it's not pseudoscience. Sure, it may be a controversial claim, and perhaps the odds of it being a natural object are far greater when, based on our experience of other objects we've seen in the solar system, just about everything has been natural, at least as far as we know, although in my opinion, Oumuamua is pretty clearly an artificial object based on its behavior, but even that is not conclusive. Until we have conclusive evidence, we can't say with any kind of certainty that either 3I Atlas or Oumuamua are definitely the products of extraterrestrial civilizations, and we may never be able to get that conclusive evidence. But just because we can't get that kind of evidence doesn't mean that we can't suggest, that we can't theorize that they might be the product of extraterrestrial civilizations. The whole notion that people need to be shut down if they suggest these kinds of theories just because they're not popular or just because they're a bit bold or extreme doesn't mean that they're not valid. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be said, that these opinions should not be expressed. And yet the current scientific community, the current dominant paradigm says, slap these opinions down, silence them, and if they're not silenced, do everything you can to destroy the reputations of those who are disseminating these kinds of opinions. Even Avi Loeb, with all of his years of research and published papers and his high degree of respectability that he had in the scientific community for all those years, a concerted effort has been made to destroy his reputation, although for the most part, it hasn't been destroyed. It's kind of tough to say that the head of astrophysics at Harvard University for 10 years could be a practitioner of pseudoscience, but nevertheless, I think it is silencing many others, and that is a true tragedy. No, these kinds of theories are not pseudoscience. They are valid theories based on the evidence. And until the scientific majority can learn to accept that, they are going to continue to hold us back in ways that could be quite tragic as time goes on. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And once again, thanks to everybody for your incredible support during my time here in Australia, the trials and tribulations that I went through while I was here. Thank you so much. And also don't forget the 3-Eye Atlas merchandise that's going to be going out of the store here in just a few days. Really fantastic design from Sunline, and of course the quality of the garments, one of which I'm wearing right now. Well, let me tell you, very comfortable stuff. So if you haven't checked that out yet, well, it's all in the description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.